After the end of the Cold War for the past 30 years, we've enjoyed a peaceful time with no wars involving the major powers going after each other. Just as people are getting back to normal life after 2 years of fighting with a virus, the war in Ukraine suddenly threw the world into another dark abyss. Even though the physical battle is far away, the internet has brought the cruelty of war in front of our eyes. As we're touched by the courage and resistance Ukrainians have displayed, we also worry about their future. We cannot help but ask, could this have been avoided? Hello everyone, welcome to Lazy Talk. We can all feel the pain of the war. Prices go up, stocks fall, and uncertainties loom. Being Americans, it's hard to imagine being forced to leave our homes because a neighbor is attacking us. Aggression toward another sovereignty should be condemned. That's what we have seen in the past week as more countries and organizations have denounced Russia and supported sanctions. But if we had more wisdom, could we have prevented the war? Like any geopolitical conflict, the cause can be complex. In this video, without oversimplifying the matter, I'll present another perspective as food for thought, with the hope of preventing the same tragedy from happening in the future. The last head of state Putin met before the war was Xi Jinping. Putin stayed in China for less than 24 hours, but met with Xi several times, issued a joint statement confirming their support of each other concerning Ukraine and Taiwan, denounced NATO expansion, announced a no-limit partnership, and signed 15 agreements, including for collaboration on information and digital technologies and global satellite navigation systems, among others. He also attended the opening ceremony for the Olympic Games. The total value of the 15 agreements is unknown, but Sino-Russian oil and gas deals alone are estimated at $118 billion. Some China experts say that the deals were more favorable to Russia, since China didn't gain anything other than Putin's appearance at the Games and his commitment to the One China policy, which he had always supported. On the surface, Russia has gained more, but China's irresistible offerings may be the trap. It's precisely Xi's generous support that emboldened Putin for the war. This is a view held by Nina Khrushcheva, professor of international affairs at the New School in New York, and the great-granddaughter of former Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev, who squared off with President J.F. Kennedy over Berlin and Cuba during the Cold War. Nina believes that Putin's irrational decision of war was based on his false illusion of a China-Russia alliance. Xi did what was needed to lock Russia into a vassal-like dependency on China, and Putin chose to walk straight into his trap, thinking that partnership with Xi would help him in his confrontation with the West. Khrushcheva believes that China would neither risk its prosperity by openly challenging the U.S. in defense of Russia, nor prop up Russia's economy by investing on the scale needed to offset the impact of the sanctions. She said China would do the bare minimum to enable Russia to sustain its confrontation with the West, which would help keep the pressure off of the Chinese regime. Nina grew up in communist Russia, and I find her perspective insightful. Beijing wants Putin to start the war in Ukraine for its own interests, to 1. divert the West's attention from its ambition over Taiwan, and 2. make Russia depend on China. Xi Jinping's 15 agreements with Putin, just like the many Belt and Road deals that the CCP had rolled out in other parts of the world, aim to control Russia. Khrushcheva said, far from an equal partner, Russia is now on track to become a kind of Chinese vassal state. We know the CCP is very deceptive, and Putin seemed to have lost his sense of judgment. The result is a war that's costing people their lives and livelihoods. But how could the United States and the West not see the danger of an alliance between China and Russia? After the Cold War and the dissolution of the Soviet Union, the democratic world has not completely accepted Russia. This is evident in NATO's continuous expansion in the Eastern European bloc. In a New York Times opinion on February 21st, columnist Thomas Friedman said that the decision during the Clinton administration to expand NATO in the 1990s, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, was ill-considered and sowed the seeds for discord. In May 1998, after the U.S. Senate ratified NATO expansion, Mr. Freeman called George Kennan, former U.S. ambassador to Moscow, for his opinion on the NATO expansion. This is Kennan's comments. "I think it is the beginning of a new Cold War. I think the Russians will gradually react quite adversely, and it will affect their policies. I think it is a tragic mistake. There was no reason for this whatsoever. No one was threatening anybody else. This expansion would make the founding fathers of this country turn over in their graves." At that time, in 1998, it was 7 years since the Soviet Union and its communist regime collapsed. Mr. Kennan brought up something that American politicians seem to have ignored. "Don't people understand? Our differences in the Cold War were with the Soviet communist regime, and now we're turning our backs on the very people who mounted the greatest bloodless revolution in history to remove that Soviet regime." George Kennan was the architect of the United States' successful containment of the Soviet Union and is considered America's greatest expert on Russia. He brought up a good point, which is that the Cold War America had with the Soviet Union wasn't against individual dictators. It was a war between two ideologies, communism and democracy. By focusing on dictators but not communism, American foreign policies eventually derailed. Mr. Kennan's prediction, unfortunately, became reality. From the late 1990s to early 2000, NATO expanded into Poland, Hungary, the Czech Republic, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, all of which were part of the former Soviet Union or its territory of influence. Meanwhile, the Clinton administration granted China the most favored nation status and accepted it into the World Trade Organization. The United States helped the largest communist state grow into the world's second largest economy. For 2 decades, the United States ignored the CCP's atrocious human rights record and bad behavior in the international community. When the Americans finally woke up to realize the CCP's ambition and the threat it posed, the two economies were already intertwined and inseparable. We scrambled for a strategy. The Trump administration advocated aligning with Russia to combat China. The Biden administration continued to see Russia as an unfriendly player and took on both China and Russia as opponents. And the result is what we see today. U.S. policy has pushed two autocratic regimes into an alliance. This alliance is destroying the future of Ukraine as well as the future of Russia, but benefiting the Chinese Communist regime. Putin is much less likely to launch the war without China's backing him, and trying to dismantle this alliance will cost the free world dearly. If we hadn't derailed from the true focus of the Cold War, communism, today's situation would be quite different. All of this certainly doesn't justify Putin's war against Ukraine, and there's no excuse for the aggression. But we are paying for our own ignorance over the past decades. There's a saying that hindsight is 20/20. I hope American policymakers will have the clear vision to bring its foreign policy to a righteous course. Let's learn the word war. It's 战争. 战 is fighting or war. It's made up of two weapons. The left part, 单, symbolizes a shooting weapon, and the right side, 格, is the weapon to kill. Together they make up the word 战. The second character, 真, means competition, struggle, or conflict. The ancient form of this word has two hands fighting for a line in the middle. When you put weapons and a conflict together, you have a war, 战争. You see, a simple 3-character English word, war, when translated into Chinese, can be a complex 2-word expression. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. See you soon.